Growing Pains and Head of the Class will not be seen tonight so that we may bring you this special A World of Difference presentation. A World of Difference. Tonight, test your attitude.
Good evening and welcome to Test Your Attitude, a special presentation of A World of Difference. I'm Phyllis Watson. If this is your first exposure to A World of Difference, allow me to explain just what it is. A World of Difference is a year-long commitment by the Anti-Defamation League, WFAA-TV, and numerous underwriters to help combat racial, ethnic, and religious prejudice in our community. We believe that by presenting programs like this one, we can show you how we can get along better in our community and find joy in celebrating our differences instead of separating ourselves because of them. This evening, we're going to show you some situations that may make you angry or even offend you, but they are very basic situations representative of things that happen every day. Some of us will see the situations as prejudiced in some way, others will see them as racist, and some of us won't see anything wrong at all, and that's what this program is all about. To help those who don't see anything wrong to realize that what we do and say may be offensive to someone else, and that action may be prejudiced or racist in some way. Now, all of us need to realize what we're doing so we can change for the better. Using a very unique computer system, we'll literally show you tonight how people in our audience feel about what they're watching. We'll then discuss why the different groups represented here feel as they do. Our audience is divided into two sections, a voting group and a non-voting group. Our voting group of 40 people was selected for us from Dallas, Tarrant, Collin, and Denton counties by the firm Audience Research and Development, ARD for short. ARD was instructed by Channel 8 to mix the audience racially, economically, religiously, academically, and by gender. On those instructions, ARD interviewed several hundred people using random code telephone calling. They came up with a 40-group person of 10 blacks, 10 Hispanics, 15 whites, and 5 members of various other ethnic groups. Now, our voting audience will be using little devices like this one that are directly connected to a computer that's being monitored here in our studio. And we've assigned different colors to the lines and bars on the graphs we'll be showing you, each representing the different ethnic groups represented here. Now, those watching at home will be able to see on their television screens all of the graphs representing the opinions of our various audience here in the studio. Steve Rolandelli and Tim Carr will be operating the computer for us here from ARD. Steve, what makes this computer system so unique? Come on up here.
Well, it's the most unique thing about it is that it allows us to look at different groups of people. We're not just going to look at how everybody feels about something, but we'll be able to isolate. For example, we could isolate men and women or different age groups, but tonight, as you've explained, we're going to be looking at different ethnic and racial groups. And the neat thing about it is we'll be able to see, hey, look at that group there. They're upset, and I'm not upset. What's going on there?
We'll be able to talk about it. Thanks, Steve. We appreciate that. Now, we do have some people in the studio who are not part of our voting audience. They do not have little devices connected to the computer. They are here solely to participate in the discussion and were selected in the same random manner as members of the voting segment. That is all except for 4 people. Those 4 people are co-chairs of the A World of Difference Coalition that's called the Metroplex A World of Difference Coalition. Now, representing the Dallas Coalition are Dr. David Pita, Dr. Roger Meyer, and Dr. Catalina Hope Garcia, and the other coalition co-chairman Zan Holmes were unable to join us this evening. And representing the Fort Worth Coalition is Mr. Robert Fernandez. Oh, wait a minute. We do have Mr. Meyer here, don't we? Yes. We have Mr. Meyer and Dr. Peter from Dallas, and we have Robert Fernandez from Fort Worth. Mr. Vernell Stearns and Mr. Bill Serault were unable to join us from Fort Worth this evening. Well, now that we've got all of those explanations done, and we'll stumble through the last part, let's take a break, and we'll come back and get started. Stay with us.
The A World of Difference project is sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, with underwriting from the Dallas Morning News WFAA Foundation, NCNB Texas, Westbridge Capital Corp., and the Dallas Foundation.
Welcome back to Test Your Attitude. New census figures are now being compiled, and according to some statisticians, 1/3 of the nation's 50 largest cities will shift from white majorities to minority majorities by the year 2000. Whites will be outnumbered by blacks in 6 of the nation's 10 most populated cities. Here in Dallas and Fort Worth, as in many other cities, racial tension is on the rise. And with those projected statistics, it seems as though we should be trying to get along better rather than increasing tension among different racial, ethnic, and religious groups. Apparently, there are many of us who just don't understand what all of the tension is about. We don't understand why something we do may be viewed as prejudiced or racist in some way. As a result, we're insensitive to the concerns and needs of people who are different. To help us better understand, we'll show and talk about some of those concerns tonight. Now, audience, here's our first scenario. What I'd like you to do in this situation is use your dials to tell me how you're feeling as you watch this first tape. Use the numbers closest to 0 if you feel very little emotion about what you see. Move the dial closest to 10 if what you see disturbs you in any way. So it's toward 0 if you feel little emotion, toward 10 if you feel disturbed in some way. Now change the setting on your dial throughout the tape to illustrate your feelings, okay? Let's see the first tape.
Quiet day, huh?
Hey, did you notice that?
What?
The 2 black guys in a Toyota.
That's unusual, isn't it?
Sure is around here. I just want to check in the car just to be safe.
You call it in, I'll check it out. Anything I can do for you guys?
No, that's okay.
You live around here?
No, we don't.
Will you please get out of the car?
Why?
Please, get out of the car. Do you have some identification? Why are you parked here?
Look, officer, my son and I are just waiting for someone. What's the problem?
No problem.
Car's fine.
Okay, just a routine check.
Yeah, routine.
What's he getting upset about?
I don't know. No harm done.
We should report them.
For what?
I don't know.
Hey, forget it. It does make you mad, though, doesn't it? I guess they just wanted to know why we were here.
I didn't know we needed a reason.
Now, as you saw during that various stages of that tape, our audience, broken down racially, reacted quite differently, and there were some surprises there. The Hispanics and whites in the audience seemed more agitated by what they saw than blacks and others. Let's talk, audience. Were the police just doing their job, or did they seem prejudiced in some way? Talk to me.
They seem somewhat prejudiced.
Oh, hold on there. Go ahead.
Okay, I thought that they seemed a little bit prejudiced, but I could still understand them wanting to pull the gentleman, question the gentleman sitting there, because I would be curious myself.
Okay, let's take a look at one of the stills from that graph. Can we have one of those stills up? At that point is where they've asked the gentleman to step out of the car, and it looks as if the whites in the audience were a little bit more agitated than the blacks, but everybody showed a peak of interest at that point. Do you think that blacks in our community or our minority groups are asked to do things like that more often than whites in the community? I think they do. I'm seeing nods.
Say what kind of neighborhood it was.
We didn't want to.
Well,
Does it make a difference?
That would make a difference
Okay.
whether they would question a black in a car in a particularly white neighborhood, for instance.
Okay, at the beginning of the tape, you heard the officer say, that's unusual for this neighborhood. 2 blacks in a Toyota, okay? So we're assuming that perhaps that was a white neighborhood or some other neighborhood.
For some reason, I took special note of the kind of neighborhood it was, big houses, big lots. So I noticed that at the beginning.
Do you think that the police sometimes, or anybody for that matter, makes decisions on who's suspicious based on race alone?
I do at times they do.
In some cases. What's the difference between prejudice and racism? I mean, were these guys being prejudiced or were they being racist?
I think they were being cautious.
You think?
I think they were being cautious more than anything. I mean, I don't think that they were actually hassling the guys. They were just wanting to know what they were doing.
Anybody else?
But then do you always stop, do you always talk to people just because they're parked? They don't always do that. I think it's in certain neighborhoods. Okay, so I working off Dallas. So what if my car stops? I would be offended if they, tell me to get out of my car.
Anybody else?
Well, if they were there to help.
I just don't think that they had a right to assume that they shouldn't belong there.
Do you think they could have handled it better? What could they have said to make it a more easy situation?
Two white guys, they wouldn't have stopped and questioned them.
Oh, how about
I
you?
agree. That's the thought that went through my mind. If they were both white, they never would have stopped the car.
The fact that he said, "What are those two black men doing sitting there in that car?" I mean, why bring up that issue?
Do you know that a couple of years ago, there were complaints of this happening in a community around Dallas? And it still happens in some communities around Dallas.
I feel that...
Let me get over to you.
I feel that he shouldn't have asked the gentleman to step out of the car. There was no reports of suspicious people in the area, blacks or any other. Why did he ask him to step out of the car?
Okay.
There's no reason.
Okay. You know what? Your conversation is a little different than how you voted. You see, a lot more came out as we got to talking about it. Let's move to the next one. How many times have you heard someone say that a member of a minority group is okay until someone of that race comes in close contact with their family? The attitudes change, don't they? They do. Those attitudes were portrayed in a 1967 movie called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? You remember that? And the same premise is the subject of a movie about to be released next month. Well, take a look at this and you decide, if anything has changed in this movie since this movie was released about 20 years ago. Take a look.
I love your daughter. There was nothing I wouldn't do to try to keep her as happy as she was the day I met her. But it seems to me, without your approval, we will make no sense at all. That is why I'm asking for the clearest possible statement of what your attitude is going to be.
I appreciate that, Doctor. It's almost in the form of an ultimatum.
Not quite, Mr. Drayton. All you have to say is goodbye. Well, that's where it's at. Thank you for the opportunity to speak my piece.
Well, still think you ought to have someone check on him?
No.
He's right about Joey, too. You know that, don't you?
Yes.
And thank God he is, Matt. That's the way I feel. Thank God he's right. She's 23 years old, and the way she is just exactly the way we brought her up to be. We answered her questions. She listened to our answers. We told her it was wrong to believe that the white people were somehow essentially superior to the black people. Or the brown or the red or the yellow ones, for that matter. People who thought that way were wrong to think that way. Sometimes hateful, usually stupid, but always, always wrong. That's what we said. And when we said it, we did not add, but don't ever fall in love with a colored man.
Boy, that brings back memories, doesn't it? Audience, let's take a vote. Set your dial to 0 if you think things today have not changed since this movie was first shown. Set your dial to 10 if you think things have changed since this movie was shown in 1967. Set your dials now. Set it to 0 if you think things have not changed, 10 to things have changed. Question number 2. Audience, set your dial to 1 if you would not allow your child or relative to marry a person of another race. Set set your dial to 10 if you don't care what race your child marries. Once again, that's set it to 0 if you would not allow your child or relative to marry a person of another race. Set your dial to 10 if you don't care. Okay, let's go back while they're getting that all together. I asked one question no one answered. What's the difference between prejudice and racism? Anybody got a good answer? Huh? Let's get some of our chairmen here. Dr. Peter, help us out.
Prejudice is the attitude, the feeling that is brought into action, the feeling of prejudged decision, of prejudged feeling that you have, and then it's brought into action, the things, the way you talk, the things that you do against another group. Racism is a feeling that one group is superior to another group.
So it's a set belief?
It's a prejudged,
Everybody
set
agree
belief,
with
right?
that?
Prejudice
Sorta?
focused on a specific group. Your prejudice, your prejudgment is predicated on a racial focus as opposed to a personality or a character or something like that.
Okay, now some people additionally believe that racism involves some sort of power. A lot of people don't agree with that definition, but if you ask some people of color, they will tell you racism has to involve some sort of power. So keep all those in mind as we go along here. Let's go to the first graph and see how you voted. That question was, do you think things have changed since 1967? Blacks said no. Hispanics, whites, and others kind of said yes. Am I reading that right, Steve? Yeah. Let's see the other graph. Can we take a peek at the other one? Well, let's go to Sydney here. So blacks did not agree. In the other one that was, would you allow your child to marry someone of a different race? Blacks and whites said no, not particularly. Hispanics and others said, it doesn't bother me too bad. Maybe things haven't changed too much. Let's get some comments over here. Let me get who's got a comment? Come on. You got to tell me what that's. Oh, you would say something way up there. Well, let's get up here and see what she has to say. What do you think?
Well, I think it's become a little easier for interracial couples to be together. I myself have, I'm Hispanic, and I have whites in my family, and I have blacks in my family, and we all get along perfectly.
How does society treat you?
They look, but they don't say anything. They don't call us any names or anything.
Not to
but
make
they,
them leave.
no, they just look.
Okay, anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I thought you could be more specific. Maybe someone wouldn't mind their child marrying a white, but maybe not Hispanic or Asian or black, and so on. So,
so we don't get particular about those races, huh? So a Hispanic person might be okay if you're white, but a black person may not be? Do we have to get real specific like that? Yes, sir.
Well, basically, a lot of these feelings are based on ignorance. And the more a person have exposure to the different ethnic groups and more they learn about that person's culture, a lot of those feelings will be diminished.
Well, that's what A World of Difference is all about, and trying to educate people about different cultures, different races, different religious beliefs. A lot of people just are hesitant about being involved with people because they don't know what they're about. People don't understand the Jewish religion. Some people don't. Some people don't understand the Islam faith. You know, if we knew a little bit more about what we were doing, you think it would help? I hope so. Let's move on. Racial tension is increasing on our college campuses, and that's no surprise, since children reflect the attitudes of their parents. Closest to home, recent incidents on the University of Texas campus in Austin have students up in arms.
More than 1,000 students demonstrated after members of a majority white fraternity painted anti-black slogans on several buildings. Another fraternity, whose members are also majority white, distributed offensive T-shirts throughout the campus. University officials gave the fraternities temporary suspensions, and the action, viewed as a soft response by the students, prompted the demonstration. The protesters demanded tougher punishments for the fraternities and public apologies from each. They also accused the university president of lying to them concerning handling of the incidents.
Now, did you get a look at this t-shirt that was handed out on the campus last week? This fraternity actually saw nothing wrong with the shirt since Little Black Sambo, they say, used to be a fraternity mascot. Audience, do you think this shirt is offensive? Turn your dial to 0 if you say no. Turn your dial to 10 if you say yes. 0 to no, 10 to yes. Okay, let's vote once again. And tell us if you think this type of thing is racist, based on the definitions we just heard. Turn your dial to 0 if you say no. Turn your dial to 10 if you say yes. This is kind of easy, isn't it, huh? Question number 3. Tell us if you think school administrators should treat this kind of action more seriously by ordering more tougher disciplinary action. Turn your dial to 0 if you vote no. Turn your dial to 10 if you vote yes. And we'll come back and look at the results. You know, a lot of people are simply insensitive to others and resistant to change no matter what it concerns. For instance, some of us may say, why stop using something like Sambo or the Confederate flag if it's just being used for fun? Or why change the name of a creek even though its name may be offensive to someone else? Well, let's take a look at those type of things.
The continued use of the Confederate flag and related symbols at South Garland High School moved these parents and civic leaders to take their opposition to the streets.
The African-American community believes that we must remove all Confederate-related symbols.
An estimated 65 Garland NAACP members and concerned parents carried signs that charge Garland school officials with racism and insensitivity. GISD does not recognize Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday as a school holiday. Out of respect for African-American students, protesters say that too must change.
Well, I think that's a time for black people to reflect on their past and their culture and their history.
The list of concerns also includes what is perceived as a lack of African-American role models on the school's front lines.
Well, first of all, if they are under the impression that there are no black educators in those positions, their information is incorrect. The principal of the evening high school is black. We have 2 black assistant principals, and the head of the district's guidance and counseling department is black.
Shugart says it's the district's position to honor Dr. King through school attendance and special programs, spelling out his civil rights contributions. But the one issue that perhaps keeps GISD embroiled in controversy is the rebel flag, the song Dixie, and a student mascot dressed as a Confederate soldier.
It does not seem to be a major issue to the students at South Garland, and consequently we have no reason to ask them to change it.
Ironically, this year's Colonel mascot is an African-American student.
Now, audience, based on what the Confederate flag represents to some groups, do you think the symbol is racist? Set your dial to 0 if you say no. Set your dial to 10 if you say yes. Okay, question number 2. If we're serious about improving harmony in our community among different races, ethnic, and religious groups, should such symbols like the Confederate flag be packed away for good? Vote 0 for no. Vote 10 for yes. Okay, let's pretend we're going on a driving tour around Texas. You're in the car, you've got your map, and you're a person of color, and you're bound to see something that's going to offend you along the way. For instance, in Johnson County, you'll find something called Niggerhead Bluff. And guess what? There's one in Bosque County, too. You'll find waterways called Nigger Creek in Brewster, Freestone, Houston, Madison, San Jacinto, Shackelford, Stevens, and Van Zandt counties. Okay, now although new maps change the names of some of those sites to the word Negro, like Negro Creek, the names are still very offensive to many residents of the state and to many visitors who come here. Audience, people around those areas say things like, but that creek's always been called that. Should we change it? Why change it now? Let's take a vote. Audience, turn your dials to 0 if you do not think such names should offend anyone. After all, they're part of our state's history. Turn your dial to 0 if you think they're part of the history. Turn your dial to 10 if you think all of those names should be changed. So if you don't think they should be changed, turn it to 0. If you do think it should be changed, turn it to 10. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to the Sambo scenario with a t-shirt and see how you voted there. The first question on the Sambo was, do you think that the Sambo t-shirt was racist? And what we got is almost everybody agreeing. They do think the shirt is offensive. We then asked people to vote again and tell us if you think this type of thing is racist. Now there's a little difference there as we defined racism. Is that our new graph? Let's try it again. Is it racist? We have a little disparity with the Hispanics not thinking it was very racist, and the other ethnic groups not being too offended by it, but blacks were definitely offended by that t-shirt. The third question we asked was, tell us if you think school administrators should treat this kind of action more seriously by ordering tougher disciplinary action. And the result we got was fairly even, but the other ethnic groups in our audience voted high. The blacks were second, whites third, and Hispanics last. Let's get some conversation on that. What about that t-shirt? We all kind of agreed it was racist. Okay, but there seemed to be some disparity on disciplinary.
It was racist. Yes, I believe that it was.
You think it was?
Yes.
You up there too? Do you think, what about disciplinary action with kids? It seems like sometimes we just kind of fluff it off because it's kids, but we're the ones teaching kids. So should we be handling these type of things differently? Let me get this lady up here. Yes, ma'am.
I think what the school and the administration do and say in those situations really reflect the attitudes that the student body picks up. And if they treat it as this was no problem, then that's what everyone else picks up. And if they treat it like this is something that needs to be talked about and understood and it's offensive, then the student body understands that message also.
Well, in this case, the student fraternities were given temporary suspensions for I don't know how long, but they were a short period of time. Yes, sir.
Again, it just shows how people can become insensitive to other groups. So instead of disciplining them, they need to promote more scholarship and understanding other groups of people.
It also tells us a lot about our kids, which are direct reflections of ourselves, doesn't it? Let's look at how you voted on the flag. On the first question for the flag, we asked, should such symbols like the flag, wait a minute, that was the second one. We asked first if you thought, based on what the Confederate flag represents to different groups, do you think the symbol is racist? Blacks said yes, Hispanics said no, way no. Whites said no, maybe. And the other ethnic groups were pretty high. So blacks and the other ethnic groups did feel that that type of thing is racist. That's a big difference there. Question number 2 was, if you're serious about improving harmony in our community, should this type of thing be packed away for good? And what we got was no by Hispanics, sort of no by whites, but a high yes by other ethnic groups. There's a lot of disparity there. Why Confederacy? Is it, and now how many of you were born in the South? Is that it? Why Confederacy? Does the flag bother you?
No.
It doesn't bother you?
No. I think
it doesn't bother you?
I mean, that's what the Civil War was fought among, trying to divide the nation, and we didn't do that, and we're not a divided nation now, so I think we should keep relics like that along just so that people know what differences people had and where we're at now.
Now, I can hear him breathing real heavy. He does not agree.
I think that, the rebel flag and like the name rebel, I don't believe that that has anything to do with racism or prejudice because it's been part of the school for so long or something like that. And I don't believe that it needs to be done away with as much as other things. Too many times that kind of thing is followed up because of some point or a political reason instead of anything that it really bothers anyone.
Okay, let me get this lady way up Here, she is really giving me a workout today. She was waving hard. Yes, ma'am.
Regarding the flag, I think that it's symbolic. And depending on what ethnic group you're from, it represents a different thing to you. Now, we all know that the Civil War occurred, as so did the Holocaust. But we don't exactly want to see that depicted on T-shirts or marched around in banners. It is a part of our history. And I hope that we can learn from those mistakes and not use it as some symbol to represent a school or other educational buildings. Or
That's a good point. You don't see anything like, excuse me, sir, anything representing the Holocaust on shirts. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I feel that the war is over.
Is it really?
I thought so, anyway.
I mean,
so why don't we just put it to rest,
totally
right?
over, we wouldn't be doing this show.
That's right. No,
Okay.
I'm talking about the North and the South,
I know
right?
what you mean. Yes, sir.
I had relatives that fought on both sides of the Civil War. I went to a college that the Union forces had used for a campus or for a dormitory, whatever, barracks, and the Southern forces had also used the same buildings. The colors of the school today are blue and gray for a good reason. I respect the people that fought in the Confederacy, and I respect the people that fought in the Union. And I see nothing wrong with the flag. I think it is being turned today for that use.
Okay. Some good opinions there. Let's take a look at what happened when we drove around Texas and saw some names of creeks and things. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of disparity, but let's take a look. Most everybody did think, when we asked, should those names be changed? Blacks, Hispanics, whites, and others said, you bet we should. Let's take a break, and we'll come back with some more. Aren't we having fun? Yes, we'll be right back. You know, when you think about it, we're a pretty intolerant, insensitive society. We do things every day that illustrate our intolerance and prejudice toward other racial, ethnic, and religious groups. In some instances, we even try to decide what's best for everyone involved, not just ourselves. We may not think that something we do every day is prejudiced or racist in some way, but take a look at these situations and see if you can identify with any of them. Has this ever happened to you, or have you seen it happen to someone else?
You're going to love this place. It's really, look, I think it'll be perfect.
I'm excited.
Here it is. Here's the place. It's right up there.
Oh, it looks great. I mean, we can see the inside.
That'll be great. Let's try it.
Richardson for you. Oh, thank you. I'll take it at my desk.
Okay.
Got it?
can I help you? I'm Barbara Bartlett.
Hello, we're Mr. and Mrs. Rivera.
Oh, how do you do?
We saw your sign on the house on Franklin Street, and we'd like to look at the inside.
It's $72,000, which is in our price range. Is that house sold yet? Well, not really. What do you mean? Is it sold or isn't it?
Well, actually, there's an offer on it. But I can show you a house on Vincent Street. Very similar, same price range. Would you like to see that one?
No, not Vincent Street. We don't like that area.
Well, there's a charming house in the Claremont area. Would you like...
No, not that area either.
Look, we're interested in the Franklin Street house or something else in that neighborhood. Are you sure that offer has been accepted?
I'm sorry, but I have nothing for you in that area.
Come on, let's go.
It's just not one of my days. Do you have the Smith file?
Yeah, I think it's in that pile somewhere. I didn't know that the Franklin house was sold.
No, it's not.
Well, what was that all about?
Anne, I can't show them a house on Franklin Street. I mean, can you imagine a Spanish couple moving in there?
Why not? What would happen?
Oh, my God. I mean, people wouldn't speak to them. They get harassed by the kids. Oh, they probably get their house spray painted. And knowing the people down there, they probably get a rock through their window.
I have never heard of anything like that ever happening before.
Well, that's because it's an all-white neighborhood. Don't you remember busing?
Yeah, but I think people have changed since then. Besides, that was 10 years ago.
Oh, most people haven't changed one iota. This is a closely knit neighborhood. I mean, I don't want to be the one to stir things up.
Well, I think that decision should be left up to them, not up to you.
And I'd love to sell them that house. But believe me, this is the best thing for everyone.
Thanks, Charlie.
What's he trying to do? Set a world's record? If he keeps it up, he's going to make it harder for everybody.
I'll go have a little talk with him, okay? I see you're a real achiever, huh? Yeah, well, you're not making any friends this way, so why don't you just slow down?
I get paid, so I work.
Well, it's not like you get paid extra for this. Why don't you just take it easy? Okay, let me put it this way. Everyone around here likes the way we're working. It's guys like you that screw it up for the rest of us. Come on, why can't you be like the rest of us?
Okay, a big order just came in. Anybody want to work overtime tonight?
Come on, it's the night before a holiday. Nobody wants to work tonight.
Charlie, how about you? Time and a half? Okay. We could use a few more like him around here.
Hey, ¿cómo no?
Hello. ¿Esto todo por hoy, señora?
I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish, sir.
Will this be all for today?
Excuse me.
Will this be all for today?
Óyeme, señor. Se me olvidó, ¿dónde están los sombreros?
Sí, mire, señora. Están en la esquina de la tienda ya, ¿ok?
Gracias.
¿Va a ser cash or credit? Card. I'm sorry. Will this be cash or credit card?
Listen, I don't understand you. Can you find me someone who speaks English, please?
Excuse me, ma'am. What do you think I'm speaking to you?
Okay, let's go back and talk about what we saw. We got some good laughs out of the audience. In the realty story, that happens a lot more often than people think. When I talk to people about coming to Dallas and trying to rent an apartment, they had all these apartments to show me when I got here. But once I walked in the office, they didn't. Now, I don't know what happened, but how do you explain something like that? Let's start over here. Do you think, anybody, that lady had the right to make that kind of decision for everyone?
No.
What did you think about her when you saw her, Mr. Meyer?
Well, I think that's exactly what World of Difference is. A good illustration of what World of Difference is trying to do is promote the proper understanding, realizing we are in an ordeal of change, but that was wrong. You can't decide for someone else what they want. This happens to be America, and they have a right to make that decision.
Okay, let's get down to brass tacks. If a black family moved in next door, how would you feel? Come on.
Well, I wouldn't feel badly at all because, ironically enough,
You do have a black family next door.
well, downstairs behind me, and they are taking care of my dog or fed her this evening, so I could be here.
Anybody have the guts to tell me if they really wouldn't like somebody moving in next door who was black, Hispanic, or other? Or do we have a real nice group of people here, huh? We do? Uh-oh! Over here on the side, he's got a comment at least. He may not, disagree.
I'm going to disappoint you. I tried to look at a house approximately 3 blocks northeast of Martin Luther King Center, and I was refused access to the house. This was in 1973.
Were you a minority in that neighborhood?
Yes.
It works both ways, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
This isn't just a black-white issue.
I was primarily refused by the neighbors, not by the realtors.
The neighbors didn't want you there.
Yes.
Neighbors wouldn't want you there. That's a good point. This is not just a black-white issue. It could be black Hispanic, Hispanic Asian. It could be anything. Yes, sir.
I had a very neat experience when I first bought my first home. My new neighbor, I went to introduce myself to him, and he said, "Gee, you're a Jew. I don't know which is worse, a Jew or a nigger." I said, "Maybe someday you'll find out." 10 years later, he found out.
What happened?
I sold it to a black man.
All right. Now, one thing about what he said is that he took action. A lot of us hear things like this, we see things like this, and what do? It's see no evil, say no evil, hear no evil. How can we change things in the community if we don't start acting on those ugly things, saying, don't say that, or you have no right to do that? In the story that we had about the Asian worker, that kind of transcends race there, doesn't it? Is ethnicity maybe a work ethic that maybe we don't have? What did you think about that? Anybody, any comments from that? I got to hit Dr. Peter on this one because I saw him watching that one heavy.
I feel that that in a sense is a work ethic of the Asian Americans. But there's nothing wrong about that except that when the boss comes in and says at the end that I wish we have some more of those, that create a resentment with other workers. And he should not have said that. It creates...
And they already had a resentment.
Right. It makes it worse.
Did it make you feel as you watched that kind of bad that the person was being criticized for doing a good job? Yes. How many people work in a place where you know people like that? Yeah, look at all the hands. You know people like that. And do we go along with comments like that, or do we stand up and say, hey, leave him alone? He needs to make a buck, let him make a buck. In that last scenario what we had with the language, the lady who came up and said, get me someone who speaks English. How many times have you heard someone say, well, they're in America, they ought to speak English? Huh? As if when you walk in the border, you're supposed to be able to speak English automatically, right? How many of us speak another language fluently? Ooh, got some good ones. You're unique. You're unique. We put those qualifications on other people, but we don't necessarily put them on ourselves. You know, when quotas are used to help advance those historically discriminated against, is that reverse discrimination? Some people feel it is. What do you think? Audience, while you watch this next tape, I need you to move your dials again. And as you vote, we want you to kind of use the numbers closest to 0 if you feel little or no emotion regarding what you see and hear. So turn it to 0 if it doesn't bother you. Turn your dials to 10 if what you see does bother you. And kind of use those dials throughout what you see. Let's take a look at this tape.
I think you'll see a higher...
February 20th, 1988, Dallas Police Chief Mac Vines announces the promotion of several minority police officers. In making the promotions, the Dallas Police Department passed over 3 white police officers in order to comply with affirmative action goals approved by the Dallas City Council. The city guidelines require that 25% of all police department promotions go to African Americans, 10% of all department promotions to Hispanics. Although the guidelines were established to ensure active minority recruitment and equal opportunities for promotions, many white officers feel such guidelines are unfair. Some say they're paying unfairly for the actions of their ancestors.
Now, we'll come back to that one. But let's go on. American Indians living in northern Wisconsin still exercise fishing rights that were granted to them years ago by the government. The rights were granted in exchange for land the government took from the Indian tribes. Those rights now anger area residents and business owners who have since moved into the area that the Indians live in. Opponents say the privileges allow the Indians to fish the lakes prior to sport fishing season, and they say that practice damages their businesses because the lakes are then low on fish. Audience, use your dials once again to illustrate your feelings as you watch this situation. Start on 0. Turn your dials to 0. And let's vote on this.
In the Dairy State during the pre-dawn hours, it's against the peaceful backdrop of just about any upper Wisconsin lake that you find protests every year. These are townspeople protesting against a treaty that allows the Chippewa Indians to spearfish year-round and bring in as much as they can catch, as long as they don't interfere with nature's replenishing process.
Police are taking us in for crossing a line in a public boat dock because there's some Indians spearing up here that have more rights than anybody else in the United States.
The Indians say they deserve to go.
I blame the governor for not getting rid of these people in the exercise, the legitimate exercise of the Chippewas' rights. This is condoning, inciting violence, and you're virtually sitting on a powder keg.
Spearfishing is the livelihood of the Chippewa. It's their main source of food. The catch is spread among people of the reservation. Protesters in cold weather made the 1989 bounty fall short of the goal of 48,000 fish. Only 16,000 were brought in. It's a small percentage of the lake's yield, yet protesters line the docks. They're afraid the Indians will deplete the fish population and send tourists elsewhere, so they chant. And they sing. Ironically, it's a song the Indians could sing too, because it's freedom they want.
Okay, let's back up. In the story about the police promotion, skipping over white officers to meet guidelines and quotas, there was a big difference in how you guys voted. Let's take a look at those stills. The blacks in the audience and the whites in the audience showed quite a bit of disparity in that. Can we take a look at those stills? Here you see where the whites were at a highest point and the blacks were way low. Black people weren't too bothered by that. Neither were the Hispanics. Were a little agitated. White people got ticked off a little further down the line here. Let's see that second still and see if we can show how far along it took before the members of the white audience, the white members of our audience got a little agitated. There was quite a bit of disparity there. We've got whites really agitated and blacks almost an even line straight across. Whoo! What do you think out here, huh?
I didn't think it went far enough when it did happen.
Say it again?
It didn't go far enough.
How so? In what way?
In that there should have been more blacks and more Hispanics promoted.
Ooh, we got militant out here. How about someone white from the audience? What do you think? Let's take a...
Well, basically, we're talking about equity in the American dream. I look forward to the day where there's a level playing field and equal access for everybody. We wouldn't need such quotas of things.
When you talk about equity, sometimes people think it means I've got to give something up. I got to give up a job. I got to give up my house. I got to give up my car. When indeed it really just means stay out of my way. Don't block my way. Let me advance like everyone else advance. Anybody over here?
Phyllis, if these individuals were fully qualified to assume the positions that they have, why should not they serve in that position? Why should they be denied the opportunity if they're just as qualified as a white or an Anglo police officer?
But they skipped over 3 white officers.
But are they not as qualified? Obviously they are.
What do you think, audience? Who's talking? Raise your hand. I got it. Okay. Hold on. There you go.
We have to get to this state in this country where the best man gets the job, no matter what.
But there's so few Hispanics, blacks, and others in those ranks with those tests. Unless they place 1, 2, or 3, do they get in? And should you skip over someone to get them in? Yes, sir, over here.
I say that since we have so little Hispanics and blacks, that was a proper move, a good decision to make.
Okay, let's get somebody over here who's saying no.
I think that you shouldn't skip over anyone that's qualified, and just because of their race does not mean they should be promoted when someone else that may be better at that job.
So how do we solve that problem? Do we only allow a number of whites to take the test, a number of blacks to take the test, a number of others to take the test? We got to come up with some solution, don't we?
Take the test and whoever is first gets it.
Take the test and whoever gets it is first? Let's get this gentleman over here. Ooh, I lost my shoe.
I have to deal with another issue, man. The gentleman said that the best man should get the job.
Ooh. Ooh, good point.
That's an old saying. I think maybe it's time we should be sensitive to that type of issue also.
Okay, let's move on to the story about the Indians, and I'll get my shoes on in just a minute. Is it fair to allow the Indians to fish ahead of everyone else? Look at the graph over here. Now, when we were talking about the police officers, there was quite a bit of disparity between blacks and whites. It kind of evened out with the other groups, but blacks still weren't real bothered by this. Why did you vote that way? What do you think? Did the one on the Indians bother you as much as the black-white issue on the promotions of the police officers? Yes, sir?
I felt they had a negotiated treaty. I felt that they had a right to do what they were doing, and it shouldn't be taken away from them.
Oh, so it was something that was granted before that wasn't granted to the blacks, Hispanics, and others in the promotion thing? How do you compare those two?
No, I just felt that when the Indians gave up the land, that they had the right to retain the fishing right. It was bargained for.
Oh, well, somebody would tell you blacks gave up something too, though.
Maybe they did.
Yeah, who else? Anybody else? Oh, way up there on the top. Make it quick, we gotta go to a break.
Well, they said in the film that it was only a small percentage of the yield of the lake, and so I think the hunters and fishers, I mean, they don't have to live from that fish. They're just out there for fun.
Okay, let's go to a break, and we'll be back with more.
The A World of Difference project is sponsored by the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, with underwriting from the Dallas Morning News WFAA Foundation, NCNB Texas, Westbridge Capital Corp., and the Dallas Foundation.
You know, America has always been a technicolor country, but it has never addressed the interests of the entire spectrum of people. Our changing demographic composition will most likely force radical changes in public policies and in the way the rest of the world sees America as a white man's country. If we are not prepared to live more harmoniously, there's bound to be more racial trouble in our country than we see right now. Getting to know our neighbor whose skin color, culture, or religion may be different than our own is a whole lot easier than dealing with the internal strife that may occur if we do not become more sensitive to the needs of people with differences. And that's what A World of Difference is all about, becoming more sensitive. What we saw tonight may seem very basic to some of us, but believe me, based on the letters we're getting concerning this project, our program may not have been basic enough. I hope all of us learned a little tonight. If nothing else, I hope we learned that our words and our actions can make a difference in our community. Stop tolerating prejudice and racism. Do something about it. If you want to get involved in the A World of Difference project, call this number during business hours, 214-960-0342. Our next two shows are on Saturday, April 21st and April 29th. Check your TV listing for us. See you then. Good night.
We can make a world of difference.